first wandered down into town, she was both proud and shy as she felt every eye, but in every shop window she'd print passing by. Then in manner of fashion she'd frown, and the world seemed to swallow her up, till it wilted she'd borne. She'd always adored the sweet little Alice blue gown. Sweet summer breeze, whispering trees, stars shining softly above, roses in bloom wafted perfume, singing birds dreaming of love, safe in your arms, far from alarms. Daylight shall come, but in vain. Tenderly pressed close to my breast, kiss me again. I'll see you again whenever spring breaks through again. Time may lie heavy between, but what has been is past forgetting.
just a song at twilight sings love's old song, sings love's old sweet song. Old melodies like that brings to mind my friend Louis Stewart. And there are many of them that evoke tales of the past. And not all of them horrific. Some of them were quite jolly in their own tragic little way. My first recollection, I feel like I'm in Citizen Kane talking about the main character. My first recollection of my friend Louis was in CAPPY'S restaurant. I was working towards the end of the summer, getting ready to go back to school with my friend Bruce as a busboy. And I remember my mother talking to this fellow. I was about a year older than I was. I was probably 16. And he was all fancily decked out in a beautiful suit, looked very sophisticated, and they were both involved in this very serious discussion. The next thing I knew, he was playing the organ in my father's restaurant for a magnificent 40 and found every week. I think it was 8 hours a night. My God. Still, he managed to enjoy the things that he enjoyed. And I first started talking to him when he would take his little breaks from the organ. We would sit around, I'd sit at the family table, and so would he. He'd be smoking his cigarettes, and he would tell me a little bit about his past. He was on his own. He was much more sophisticated than I was, which I thought I was cock of the walk at school, George Sanders. But he, had been on his own for a while, and he was living a kind of a lifestyle and knew all kinds of interesting people and had adventures. But he was totally on his own with no help from anybody. And it was a difficult thing for him to go through, but he managed to with some elan and had a good time. And we both started hanging out and having little adventures. There was a time I remember we stole the family car, went on to New York, and spent an entire, I think it was from the afternoon, from like 3 or 4 o'clock. We got back at 4 the next morning, or 6 actually, because I remember it was light out. I had told my mother I needed the car to bring my pants to the tailor's. And he and I set forth and broke into the Metropolitan Opera and managed to hear the chorus from Cavalleria Rusticana, which was one of the first operas that he introduced me to. Of course, I had heard opera before, but there was something about the way he enjoyed opera and loved it so that was very, very catching. God, anyhow, we were out all those hours, and we went to a lot of gay bars that he knew in the village. And in that time, he met somebody he knew very well and was had a crush on him. And we broke into this church on 5th Avenue. I don't remember which one it was. I know it wasn't St. Patrick's. But it was a fairly good-sized church, and he always managed to find the key to the organ. So there he is at 3 or 4 in the morning, playing away, wistfully wrapped up in his world of Louis. And this guy starts crying on my shoulder. How could he be so cruel? I love him so. And I just kept patting him on. I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly tell this guy? That he was a swine, yes, but he was also a very gifted young artist. And with artists, you had to bear with it. Words to that effect, or some bullshit I gave him. And when we finally got home that dawn, my mother happened to be making coffee in the kitchen, probably hadn't been to bed yet, playing cards all night or something. And there we walked in, or I did, because I had dropped him off already. He escaped the wrath. He somehow always managed to do that. And she says, "Did you pick up the pants?" And of course I didn't. Luckily, I wasn't chastised in any way. Over the years I would be for many various misadventures. But that's the first big thing that I remember, us going out and carrying on in public like mad with all kinds of people and characters. And I had quite a few friends at that time, and they were all interesting in many ways, but Lewis had a lot of color, and as I say, he was interested in many of the things I was. And he had friends that were older. I started hanging out with older people, finding that I got more out of it and enjoyed their maturity. And now it's the opposite. The past 20 years I've been hanging out with younger people, because the old ones are either all dying or whatever. But the joys that we had going out and going to the West Park Inn. I had introduced him to Gone with the Wind, and he introduced me to the Red Shoes, which later became the movie for Carol and I, my little childhood sweetheart from school. We went everywhere to see it. But when I first saw that picture, I tell you, there's no words that I can describe, and I'm not going to go into a long tirade, but it was so magical, so beautiful. And life that was in East Rockaway at the time, despite my little adventures with Lewis and the guys I knew and the characters on the corner, was very drab, very ordinary. And to see this wonderful world of artists and color and music, it was to me what I had always wanted. And I followed it from theater to theater like a camp follower. And so did he. And we knew every line in the picture. And then I was finally introduced to Paula Castle. In my book I call her Paula the Singer. And I have to read a couple of pages maybe from the book to give you an idea of some of the things that we did. But there's not too much of them in it. But she had a beautiful voice, and she had cut an album for Bethlehem Records. And we were all excited about it because, gee, a real record on disc, you know, on wax. And we went and were waiting to hear the first dubs at their mutual friend, another singer, Ginger Peppy. And we were up all night, a whole bunch of people. I don't remember who the rest were. Perhaps his friend Bill Schuyler, who owned a bar where he was kind of Ginger's mentor. And the other people are vague in my head. Maybe Ginger's husband. And we were playing Paula's record as the dawn came up. And of course one of the songs was Yesterday's Gardenias. And it was just a magical night or morning, and we never forgot it. I think we got home at 8 or 9 o'clock and went our respective ways. But then I found that the people that he knew, they were all characters and very interesting. And at that time, I was in a learning period, and it was great for me. I was starting to write terribly, and it was a good learning experience, as I say. And we used to go in the city and go with Paula to 42nd Street, have hot dogs at Grant's, and then go see movies like Black Narcissus, made by the people who did The Red Shoes. And Paula would laugh lustily at the cartoons, I remember, and we all enjoyed Black Narcissus. And just went over to her house sometimes afterwards and saw her mother, Mama Lucia, Louis used to call her. She was a very nice lady. And so it was. And there were many adventures had there, but I decided it was time to leave, and he had an apartment in the city by then. But he was getting a bit tired of it and was going nowhere. So he was worried about this, and I had convinced him maybe to go to California with me, and this madman I knew, Joe Regina, was a close friend of mine, but insane and impossible. So we got a cab to deliver to Denver, and then we were supposed to pick up another car in Denver and go to Las Vegas, and then from Las Vegas with this Corvette to Hollywood. Anyhow, we got to Pittsburgh. And by then, Louis was ready to kill Regina and vice versa. And Louis had all his remains in the world. And in Pittsburgh, he said, I have to leave. And he got on the bus and headed for Savannah, which started a whole other series of adventures a year or two later for me. Carrying his big phonograph, the Pilot, I remember it was called, and whatever remnants he had of whatever he owned. And that was it. I had many adventures in Hollywood, which are described in my book, and we need not go into here, except one thing that happened. This is in my book. I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard one sunny afternoon, and this guy stops me. He says, I know you. He says, I saw you in the Colony Record Shop maybe 2 or 3 years ago. He says, you were with this woman with these long, long earrings, and she was really dressed like a gypsy. And there was this guy with you, and he was wearing a tuxedo. He says, and you were in Colony Records, but the three of you stuck out, and I remembered you. And he said, man, what a sight. He says, and I saw you now, and I never forgot it. And he went his way and left me standing there on Hollywood Boulevard. Strange. All right. So, I'm back in East Rockaway after the Hollywood adventure, which was almost a year. And Louis has been writing to me, and I've been writing to him and sending tapes back and forth, audio tapes. And I went down to visit him, and I appeared on a TV show he was doing.
Savannah's musical family is introduced by Mr. Joseph Upchurch. We have with us here, bringing his musical knowledge, Mr. Lou Stewart, who is going to play My Heart in Alabama,
or something like that, and then Louis would play the song, clunk, 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 and the last note he would hit wrong deliberately. And I did The Shooting of Dan McGrew, and Louis played in the background, and I had told the people, I wish I had a recording of this, but they didn't have videotape there yet. As I recited, to superimpose his fingers playing, and, you know, he'd play wintry music, as I said. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon. The kid that handles the music box was hitting the jag time tune. And back of the bar in a solo game sat dangerous Dan McGrew. And it was very successful, and I managed to get a job through that. Cousin Burl, I talked to him about it. He was the program director, and I was to come back in a month in February and begin my radio and TV career in Savannah, Georgia. Yeah. Well, later, when he came to New York, and I was by then working at WNCN, the early WNCN with no union, he was living with Stan Freeman, and that opened a whole new book. Let's see, what else do we have in this glorious, glorious retelling of our tales? So he's back in New York, I'm back in New York. By then I was working at the early WNCN, And Louis started to go to shows and sell paintings that he would do on wood. And that was the beginning of his fortune. I remember him saying, should I do this? It's $50 a month to rent. Should I take the chance? And Stan Freeman said, yes, go ahead. And I said, why not? So he opened a store, and it took off like crazy. From there, I won't go into his financial fortunes, but he got a house and Fire Island and a couple of houses and whatever it was, and suddenly he became the man of wealth that he is today. From the little $40 a week organ player to the owner of Diva Restaurant in New York. Just as impossible as ever, but did all the things he wanted to do. I'd like to have a restaurant with all these smart people coming in. And in the last year of the restaurant, he got that accomplished. He turned it into a nightclub, and people like Tony Bennett and Liza Minnelli and their ilk came in, and it was really good. But then everybody started copying his thing, and he moved on and became the inhabitor of Boca Raton, which I plan to visit soon, and hopefully it won't be the last time we see each other, but we'll see.
Zeigt der Welt nicht dein Herz, was versteht sie von deinem Schmerz? Wenn dir Rauch zum Weinen ist, gib smiling, my dear, gib smiling. Einem anderen zeigen, lass die brennende Sehnsucht immer schweigen, zeig der Welt nicht dein Herz, was versteht sie von deinem Schmerz? Wenn die Rauch zum Weinen ist, keep smiling, my dear, keep smiling.